Hello Mole fans, this is Matt from the Mole Family Quarantine Edition YouTube channel. And today we're going to try something a little different on the channel. We're going to start a series called The Mole Tracker, where we'll look at the new Netflix competition reality series, The Mole, take a look at the remaining contestants, track their suspicious behavior, and rank them in order of most likely to be the mole. Sports fans will recognize the PTI-style topic rundown board on the right side. Today we'll cover the first 5 episodes that dropped from Netflix last Friday, so let's get right into it. First, let me give you a little background on my mole history. I started watching The Mole way back in 2001, the original ABC series starring Anderson Cooper as the host. I had known Anderson Cooper because he was a host on a show that was in our high school in the 90s, Channel 1, so I was familiar with his work. So I was intrigued by that. I was also intrigued by the premise of having 10 players whittled down to 1. It reminded me of the Agatha Christie novel, And Then There Were None, which is one of the few books that I've read and enjoyed. So I was a huge fan of the show. Once I started watching, the math nerd in me got addicted to the problem-solving challenges, the cheeky humor, the drama, the intrigue. I was hooked. But my favorite part of the show was playing along and trying to guess who the mole was. I remember getting on the message boards, the ABC message boards, which were a new thing back in 2001, logging in and chatting with mole fans around the world, making my guess as to who the mole could be. So it's very cool that 21 years later, doing a similar thing on a rebooted version of the show. And a couple of years ago, I discovered that the Dutch version of the show, Wie is de Mol, was still running. And they were airing new episodes that you could watch with English subtitles on YouTube. Shout out to Marika at the WIDM English Subs YouTube channel for doing that service for us English speakers. So I started watching those seasons that rekindled my love for the mole because it had been off the air in the US since 2008. And then the pandemic hit. With my family, bored, alone in the house, wondering what to do, and we came up with the idea of doing our own home version of The Mole. So we filmed it, we recorded it, we edited it like the original version, and that's what you see on this YouTube channel, The Mole Family Quarantine Edition. So we only have 4 players, my 2 kids, my wife and myself, but we had a blast doing it. It was so much fun. It's only 3 episodes. You can check it out when you're done binge watching the Netflix version if you're interested. It was so much fun. So with all that background, having watched the original Anderson Cooper series, I also did watch the celebrity editions and the 2008 version, as well as probably about 5 or 6 seasons of the Dutch Wie is de Mol, and participating in my own home version. I've gotten a bit of a knack for how to spot the mole. It's not always foolproof, but it's always fun to try. So based on my mole watching history, I've found that there's 3 key components to discovering who the mole is. Number 1 is the obvious one, tracking the sabotages, both overt and subtle. These are things like if they go the wrong way with the map, if they don't finish a challenge on time, if they drop the bag. These are important things and obviously things that are key to track, but they could be misleading because these are the things that the other contestants can do when they're trying to act like the mole or draw some suspicion on themselves. So it's good to track these things, but you got to be careful with that and not rely on it too much when you're making your mole guess. The second thing is clues or themes that are placed in the episodes by the producers. Now, one caveat here, we're not sure whether the Netflix version is even going to have clues in it, but historically in the Dutch version and the original American version, there have been clues interspersed throughout the episodes towards the identity of the mole. In my experience, I've found that they're either way too obscure or way too obvious. So once it gets to a point, maybe there'll be a screen that somebody will do a screen capture, then it'll spell out who the mole is in plain language, or it'll be something so obscure nobody would have thought about it. So I wouldn't rely on the clues that much. I wouldn't dig into it too deeply and try to search for every last thing. But if you have a suspicion as to who the mole is, and then maybe there's a couple of clues or a couple of themes, if there's a number or a color pattern that crops up and is associated with one of the players, that could be something to look out for. The third component, which I think is the most important and the least discussed, is tracking the decisions of the players, thinking about the fact that the mole has advanced knowledge of the challenges that are coming up. So if you had advanced knowledge of what was coming up, what decision would you make as the mole? Which group would you want to be part of? Which challenges would you want to succeed at and look like a hero that wouldn't necessarily add too much to the pot? Or even better, you succeed on your part, but you know somebody else is going to fail. Or if there's a situation where you'd be more comfortable, then it's a less rigorous activity or something. A lot of times the mole will choose that. So with those things in mind, let's take a closer look at the remaining contestants. We'll break them into a couple of broad categories. First, players that seem like they are trying too hard to look like the mole. These players were possibly set up to look like obvious mole picks at the beginning, but now after 5 episodes it may be a little too obvious. The first in that category is Greg. He's an entertaining character, but attracting way too much attention to himself to actually be the mole, in my opinion. From playing triangles, eating bananas, looking at the dossiers, whatever bizarre swimming move that was in the treasure hunt, this is not the way to behave if you're trying to blend in. Now, I actually think he's on the right track and playing a sneaky smart game as a contestant. In fact, he's my early pick to win the prize pot at the end. And I know some fans in the mole community have him high on their mole lists. But after week 1, I have him last on my list of mole suspects. We'll see if that changes after the new episodes drop this week. Next in this category is Joy, perhaps the most blatant example, maybe in the history of the show, of trying too hard to look like the mole. Now, theoretically, the mole could literally ruin every single mission they're a part of, make it practically impossible for the group to earn any money ever, but that would be no fun, and I don't think the producers would allow it. But this seems to be Joy's strategy. Now, the die-hard mole fans in the Netherlands have something they call follow the money, meaning whoever costs the group the most money is most likely the mole. But for this reboot, it seems a little too obvious in my opinion, and the show would lose a lot of credibility having the mole bid $25,000 out of the pot just like that. For those reasons, Joy checks in at number 7 on my list of mole suspects. The next category is players that are trying too hard to win the game in order for them to be the mole. And first in this category is William. The ultimate team player, Will has single-handedly won a lot of money for the prize pot and has played the hero role pretty much throughout. Some players in the game have found this suspicious, as if he's trying to bank some goodwill for later sabotage, but I don't think so. He seems a little too genuine to me to be the mole. I also don't think the producers would put the mole in such a prominent position in the first challenge, when he had the secret mission to steal the case. I'm hoping he hangs around for a while because he is an asset to the group. I like seeing the group win the money, and he's simply a cool dude. But in my mind, probably not the mole. Number 6 on my list. Next up is Avery. I really like the way Avery is playing the game. She tries hard in most missions, calls out others for not being team players, forms a coalition, casts some suspicion on herself every so often to put some doubt in the minds of others. She's on the lookout for others doing sneaky things like Jacob with counting the money. This is textbook excellent mole play, a performance worthy of the moniker professional gamer. But when Avery says in her confessional, quote, "I'm going to keep that information to myself," that sounds to me like something a player would say. If I'm the mole, I'm pointing out to the group every time someone else slips up. But if I'm a player, I'm keeping that information myself to gain an advantage, just like Avery did. So bravo, Avery, if you are in fact the mole and using some twisted reverse psychology here. But to me, this has the looks of a player with a solid strategy, a good chance to go far in this game, but only number 5 on my rankings of likely moles. The final player in this category is PRANAV. He's in the coalition with Avery, and he's playing a similar game, definitely projecting a sense of trying hard and being a team player. But a part of me thinks that he could be using his analytical style to manipulate the players as the mole, so he ranks a little higher on my list than Avery does. Also, some red flags went up with me when he tried to correct Sandy when she was counting money in the bank heist challenge. With the pot so low at that point, a lot of times a mole will try to be the hero in the next game to get the pot to a level of respectability. So with that in mind, I wonder if Pranav, as a potential mole, was trying extra hard to coax the team to victory here, and perhaps he had maybe a little too much advanced knowledge when he corrected Sandy that the amount on the bills was 50,000 and not 500,000. Like, how would he have known that she said the wrong amount? So just throwing that theory out there. Honestly, it's a bit of a long shot. So Pranav still comes in at only number 4 on my list of suspects. Now we get to the real prime suspects. The players in this category hit the sweet spot with a good mix of sabotage and blending in. Let's start with KESI. She was my initial gut reaction pick, just from reading the cast list before I started watching the show. She seems to have the best interest in mind for the group, but she's also shown a willingness to give up some money to obtain clues and extra time. And despite playing the hero role in the treasure hunt, she only managed to bring up one case. Didn't really do anything on the train except be the lookout, so she's definitely still on my radar. However, I don't think the mole would have chosen to go first in the one-on-one sessions with Alex during the bidding challenge, but we see KESI volunteering to go first. I would expect the mole to want to go towards the end so that they can secretly be told what the others bid and can adjust their strategy accordingly. This is exactly what happened during one of the recent seasons of the Dutch Mole. So therefore, for that reason, KESI's kind of moved down my list a bit, checking in at number 3. Coming in at number 2 on my mole list is Jacob. He's had his fair share of sabotage, arriving 18 seconds late in the mail mission, apparently miscounting the money in the bank heist, opening the clue in the first mission. He also has that good old boy vibe with a quaint backstory of being a small-town firefighter who never left the country before, so that all serves as perfect cover for a mole. I was originally on board with Avery, thinking Jacob was the mole, but the evidence is really mounting for my number 1 pick. And that is KESI. She flew under the radar for me initially, which is exactly what a good mole should do, incidentally, but got my attention with 2 clear sabotages. First, by not reading the correct gold-themed names in the bank mission. I mean, you had an hour to read 3 pages and you couldn't get 1? Come on, man! And then by failing to grab the mailbag from the train. And then once that gets on your radar, you start noticing other things that happened in the past, like staying silent on the plane searching for the dinghy, even though she had the same vantage point as Avery, and Avery got all the attention. Her group was also the last to escape the prison cells. And I thought it was interesting that she said at one point, if only we had 10 more minutes, as if she knew somehow that 10 minutes had already been deducted. I also have a hunch that the phone that she used to get the clue from Alex could have been used for more than just getting that clue. Could the producers have sent text messages to her in the cell about the progress of the other groups or the decisions of the leaders, perhaps? But the thing that solidified my choice with KESI as my number 1 suspect is the explosive lunch challenge. Think about it. If you were the mole and you knew what was going to happen in this game, where would you sit? Would you want to subject yourself to a disgusting meal and try not to puke the rest of the day? Or would you intentionally position yourself where you knew your food would taste fine and then bluff your way out to expose a detonator? Well, that's exactly what KESI did, and that's why I am locking her in as my prime mole suspect this week. So there you have it. My best guess as to where things stand after 5 episodes. I will say that the producers of The Mole generally do a great job of editing to make it seem like any of the remaining contestants could be the mole. So it truly could be anyone at this point. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll be back next week to recap the remaining players after the next batch of shows drops on Friday. Until then, I look forward to hearing comments from my fellow mole fans. Take care.